All right, good evening, everyone, in person as well as people from the Zoom. Today, I have to begin this session by bringing you a very sad news. So one of our longtime supporters and founding members, our dearest Lily Khoo, has passed away yesterday morning. So this news saddened many of the members and friends of Lily, especially those who know Lily for many, many years, including Bante Tejadamo. So with the heaviest heart, I would like to read out a letter that Bante wrote to all the members yesterday. So in case if you didn't receive them. Okay, so this is what Bante wrote. Dear friends of the Associations of Engaged Buddhists and Sangha Lodge, this morning at 10:10 a.m., I received a phone call from Dr. Kim Eng Khoo to inform me that our dear Dhamma sister, Lily Khoo, has just passed away in a nursing home in Penang. Every member and friend of the association ought to feel great sorrow and at the death of Lily. Anyone even remotely connected with the association and its activities over the past almost 30 years owes her a debt of gratitude. People will recall that Lily had a severe stroke in February 2020. Lily was found in her apartment in Newtown and rushed to RPA Hospital, ICU. After many months, returning to Penang as was her wish. She stayed briefly at her old home and in a number of nursing homes. Her sufferings finally came to an end this morning. When I returned from Thailand in 91 or 92, I met Lily and other founding members of the Now Associations at the site of the Buddhist Library, at that time in Lewisham. I had intended to live at Wat Buddhadhamma, but needed some medical treatment first. Long Bay Jail contacted the library and asked if there was a monk available to visit prisoner. Since I had been doing this in Thailand, I accepted the invitation of the jail and began working with the prisoners every week, teaching Dhamma and meditations. Soon after this, I began hospice and hospital chaplaincy at St. Vincent's, where Lily worked, and various other hospitals in and around Sydney. Lily and the small founding group of supporters value this work and wish to see it continue. Residing at the library proved difficult, and Lily and a small group of others took it upon themselves to find another residence. We moved to Allens Avenue in Petersham, and soon after this move, the association was born. Lily was the principal and most enthusiastic supporter at this time and has been ever since. Even after her stroke while in hospital, she would ask me how things were going for the association. Vejasala, our retreat center, was a place she was deeply committed to, and it held a special place in her heart. We owe the original 3 kutis to her hard work and fundraising skills. Lily was a true champion of the Dhamma, always ready to pitch in and help, always ready to put herself out for others and to show incredible generosity and perseverance. She was a most engaging presence at all our activities, from regular meditation evening to retreats and wonderful events such as our food fair. Each of you will have your own memories and stories, I'm sure. Treasure them and pray for Lily. Send her great metta and gratitude. We shall try to organize a special puja for her in due course. With great sadness and deep gratitude to all of you, and a special deep bow in the heart to a truly great Dharma sister and friend, I owe a personal debt of gratitude to Lily, which can never be repaid. Yours in the Dhamma with every blessing, Bante Tejadamo. It was Bante wrote yesterday, right? So like what Bante said, many of us have owed Lily a great debt of gratitude for her contribution to the association, as well as her dedications to the practice of Dhamma. So we hope you will join us by dedicating our merits through our practice tonight to Lily, sending her lots of metta and gratitude, May she be well. May she be happy. May she embark on the path of Buddha and attain Nibbana. So today we are very grateful that our very popular Dhamma and meditation teacher, Dr. Gooi, or more affectionately being called Chien Hoong, and to come tonight despite the horrible weather and teach us how to find joy in our daily life. So let me just give you a brief introduction of Dr. Gooi. So Dr. Chien Hoong Gooi is a teacher of Buddhism and Buddhist meditation in the insight and mindfulness traditions. By profession, he is a clinical psychologist and works primarily in the training of postgraduate level clinical psychology students at UNSW. Chien Hoong is a board member of the Buddhist Library and also previously served as the Buddhist Chaplain at the UNSW. So we appreciate your support and your teaching, Chien Hoong. So without further ado, let us begin by paying respect to the Triple Gem as well as our teacher tonight.
Bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Right. Then let's start off with at least a short meditation practice before we speak a little bit. And then if there's more time, we'll do a bit more for practice later in the evening. Yep. So settle yourself in a comfortable posture, one that's suitable for practice. Whether you're at home joining us via Zoom, whether you're here with us, or whether you might be even viewing the recording later on at some point in the future. So having a posture suitable for practice is typically quite fairly upright, but yet quite at ease. Of course, depending on the suitability of your body, you may prefer to lie down or make any adjustments necessary. For the first few moments, just simply arriving into this space, noticing the physical aspects of your experience, the experience of posture, the experience of the body. Simply noticing, paying attention lightly to the reality and the experience of the body. Whether it's tight, it's relaxed, it's warm, it's cool. Simply noticing for a few moments. This is the experience of the body. Can be helpful to bring your attention to various points of the body, noticing the sense of contact of the feet, noticing the sense of contact of the body against the chair, the cushion, the seat, or the place that your body is resting. Noticing the sense of touch of your hands and your fingers. Expanding your awareness to the entire body. Awareness of the entire physical body. paying attention, and simply noticing. For a few moments, direct your attention or awareness to the state of your mind. Again, simply noticing the quality of the mind right now, as it is. Whether it's tight, it's relaxed, it's restless, it's busy, it's calm, it's tired. Simply noticing. And softening into any tension that you notice physically or mentally. Letting go of any tightness, letting go of any tension or pressure, however or wherever you experience this. If you have an existing practice, please use that practice, whether it's awareness of breath, awareness of body, awareness of metta, reflections on gratitude. So whatever it is that is most comfortable and familiar to you, it is a helpful practice. Use that. Regardless of the practice that you choose, have a little gentle smile. This helps you notice and pay attention in a particular manner with a good sense of softness, a sense of openness and acceptance. Although this smile can be very slight, it helps go a long way in our practice, in the cultivation of the heart and mind. Whatever practice that you've chosen, stay with that. But staying with that with a balanced effort, not pushing the practice too hard, but not pulling back and being too lax. It's about working with just that right level that creates a sense of balance. Energy is there. There's also a sense of calm and settledness. As much as you can, maintain the posture as you've started. And remember to maintain that slight smile. Smiling with your mouth, with your eyes, and through your heart. as we now move towards the last part of our practice, it will be helpful for us to just incline the mind towards the reflections of gratitude. Just bring to mind one thing, one person, or one situation that you can be genuinely grateful for. It's something that can be small or something that's very significant. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you can genuinely feel a sense of gratitude towards, whether it's what you have had, what others have given or shown kindness towards you, or even simply being in the space that you're in. Spending a few moments to reflect on gratitude and the factors and conditions that have helped supported your journey up until this point. As you bring your mind to incline towards the reflections of gratitude, pay attention to the sense of warmth, the sense of care, the sense of lightness that emerge, that comes along with the reflections of gratitude. Simply paying attention to that and spending also in your mind a few moments to reflect on the factors and causes for gratitude. There may be more than one thing, one person that starts to arise. Allow it to come in its own time naturally. You might be naturally grateful for various things in your life. Just touch them gently with your awareness and your attention. This I'm grateful for. This I'm grateful for. This I'm grateful for. As you're doing this, noticing the felt sense of a grateful mind, the sense of lift and joy that comes along with this reflection. Okay. Well, good to see all of you here. And also those joining us via Zoom. Can't quite see you, but can feel your sense of presence with us. And thank you for joining us from afar. So, the topic for this evening is finding joy. This is a personal journey of mine for some time, but especially over the last about 3.5 years or so. This has been the focus of my own Dharma practice. So I thought that it would be useful for me to actually have a look at also in the greater body of the Buddhist literature. What is it about joy, the position and the place of joy in the Buddha Dharma, and also in each of our practice. Really, the Buddha's teaching is about liberation. Liberation from pain and suffering, that's a very typical notion. That's very typically introduced that way. But if you flip that around, finding liberation is also about finding real pure joy. The joyful aspects of the Dharma sometimes can be overlooked a little bit. Yeah, when people think of Dharma practice or even Buddhism, people think of suffering, which is the key part, because in order to really access deep, real joy, we need to work out what's getting in the way, which is typically pain and suffering. And that's definitely a large part of what the Buddha Dharma is about. But sometimes even, I was going to say even for those who have been practicing a while, but I would say especially those who have been practicing a while, they sometimes forget this notion and the teachings around joy and the importance of joy. In fact, those who are new to the Dharma experience sometimes way more joy than those who've been practicing for 10, 20, 50 years. When you first come across it, there's a sense of, wow, this is amazing. This speaks to a lot of the things and experiences I have in my life. This is something worthwhile. And some of us can remember how that was for us last year, 5 years ago, 10, 20, 50 years ago. Right? It's that sense of initially finding something that's so valuable and so relevant. And then sometimes you start off that way, but after practicing sometimes, we get a little bit too serious about it. And we sometimes end up forgetting the joyful aspects of practice and the emphasis on, in fact, the joy the Buddha has spoken about for many, many years. And part of this is also because of, I think, partly to do with meditation practice as well. Well, that's at least from my perspective. Because in some ways, meditation practice is a serious endeavor. It is the cultivation of states of our mind. It is being able to work with our mind, the habits of the mind, and it's also a form of training of the mind. So in some ways, it's true, it's a very serious business. But sometimes we can get overly serious about it. And then the joy goes. And this again, I see from my own experience and experience of people around me, sometimes the more practice that we do, the more serious that it becomes, and the tighter and more tension that arises. And this is, I think, sometimes about a balance on our part. That's why I've been practicing seriously with meditation for the last 20 years now. I've been teaching about the last 12. And in the entire process, I've shifted and changed and evolved and learned with various different teachers, which I'm very, very grateful for. And each teacher has given me different things along the way. And when I first started with meditation, I learned from a system and a tradition that emphasized a lot about making sure that you apply the right effort, you're persistent, right? You're giving your full energy, which is really, really important, you know. But at the same time, that itself, if you just keep taking that direction, it's like in your entire journey, you can only know how to turn left. Yes, to be fair, if you want to go from Sydney to Canberra, you can find your way there by only turning left, but it might take a little bit of time. You need to take left turns and right turns. So in the more recent years, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've come across teachers, even the same teachers who have actually seen how I've grown over the years, teaching me how to turn right a little bit more, which is to loosen up, to soften into the practice, and to also find and touch joy in the practice. And this is what I will be speaking a little bit more about this evening. So the Buddha's teaching and the fundamental sense of it is about really finding deep joy. It's the freedom and the liberation, that joy that comes along with that. But as I was saying, the joyful aspects sometimes get overlooked because we've got too serious with the practice. And also the other part is the misunderstanding of the concepts such as disenchantment, disillusionment, in Pali, nibbida, and dispassion, viraga. These are refined states of once there's certain understanding that emerges in the practice that you naturally let go and let be those elements or phenomena that is not helpful. But sometimes because of our misunderstanding, we charge too fast ahead and we force ourselves to become disenchanted, disillusioned, dispassionate, but there's aversion in it, there's tension in there. The difference is whether how much tension there is. Because when we look about craving, right, the characteristic of craving, which is one of the root cause or the key root cause of pain and suffering, is there's tension and tightness. So with the misunderstanding of concepts, initially, if you don't have a direct experience of it, these concepts of nibbida and viraga, we can, instead of having a nice flower and let that go in the water, what we're doing is this, which is a completely different place. Yeah. And that's why some of us get stuck, sometimes for years, in that state that's unhelpful without noticing it. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't take Dharma practice seriously, that you shouldn't have disenchantment and dispassion when it arises. But what I'm saying is that you need to turn left and you also need to know how to turn right, so that the practice is balanced in that way. If you look at the Buddha statue, most of the time you see that he is smiling, right? Big smile, small smile, he's often smiling. There is joy and happiness in that. Yeah. And sometimes we've been practicing and slogging away, especially in meditation retreats, and we forget that under the smiling gaze of the Buddha, he's telling us, hey, remember to balance your practice. So this in itself is a key teaching, looking at what the Buddha's image actually represents and how it's actually presented. There's often a smile, a joyous, calm, serene smile. And you look at the suttas, there are not a lot of suttas that actually describe the community of practitioners during the Buddha's time, but there are a few of them, and one of them is in Majjhima Nikaya, 89. This is when King Pasenadi of Kosala went and visited the Buddha. He happened to be in an area that's close by to a town called Medatalumpa. So he was doing business there, something to do with him being a king, and he had some free time and he says, oh, let me go out and see whether I can visit some holy people. And he inquired around and he heard that the Buddha is actually not far. So he went and visited the Buddha and says, great, he's nearby. I'll go and pay respects. So he arrived at where the Buddha was actually residing at that time. And he knocked and he had a little bit of a cough, which announced his arrival, which is tradition there. And the Buddha opened his little hut. This is in the scripture actually. And then King Pasenadi fell on the ground, paid respect to the Buddha. In fact, he was really so deeply respectful of the Buddha that in fact the Buddha asked him, what reason do you have such supreme honor towards me? This was the Buddha, because you're a king and you're showing such deep respect. Why? What reason it is that you show such supreme honor? And King Pasenadi gave a few different reasons. And he says that because of all these, because of this, because of that, I infer, right, that the Dhamma about the Blessed One, based on that, I infer that the Blessed One is fully enlightened, the Dharma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One, and the Sangha practicing the good way. So because of all these things, and one of the things that King Pasenadi mentions is this. He says some recluse and Brahmins who are lean, wretched, unsightly, jaundiced, with veins standing out on their limbs, such that people would not want to look at them again. So it says there are those practitioners. But here in the community of the Buddha, I see bhikkhus smiling and cheerful, sincerely joyful, plainly delighting, their faculties fresh, living at ease, unruffled, subsisting on what others give, abiding with a mind as aloof as a wild deer's. If you look at a different translation, it reads as thus. But here I see almsmen or bhikkhu, joyous and joyful, elated and exultant, buoyant and cheerful of mind, without a care or a worry, tranquil, subsisting on what others bestow, with hearts as free as wild creatures. You can almost see that this is a community of practitioners, and they were large numbers around where Buddha lived. That this was the community that was essentially, if you look around them, you can experience a sense of joy. And in another part of that sutta, King Pasenadi also said, and they view each other with kindly eyes. So there's a real sense of care and warmth around. There's a real sense of joy. There's a sense of cohesion in the community itself. So as you can see, even in the scriptures, as you look into the description of the Buddha's community around that time, you get a felt sense that it is a very joyous space and a very joyous community. And then you look at the Dharma, teachings to do with joyful states. And there's plenty, joy, happiness. And there are 4 key ones that I've looked up. First one in Pali is pamoja, delight. Translation is joy. There's a sense of delight and joy. The other one, which is featured a fair bit, especially in the meditation literature, is piti, often translated as rapture, joyful interest, or even some teachers translate it as a sense of enthusiasm. And there's sukha, which is happiness, or some teachers translate it as bliss. I think happiness probably captures it for me probably a little bit better. And then there's, of course, mudita, one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, sympathetic joy, joy for others, empathic joy for others. These are all key teachings. They're not just kind of fringe stuff that the Buddha spoke about once in a while. And these are key aspects of practice. In fact, joy is not only the fruit of awakening, but a prerequisite for awakening. This is what one of the Dharma teachers in the West, James Barras, actually said. You can look up his article called Lighten Up in Tricycle, 2004, James Barras. And he says this because it is true. This is what the Buddha taught. When you look at the Upanishad Sutta, Samyutta Nikaya 12:23, the Buddha teaches what are the prerequisites towards enlightenment, full enlightenment, right? And he talked about dependent origination, the usual cycle that we are familiar with, from ignorance, right, all the way to suffering. And then from suffering, it can actually go the other way, right? All the way ending up to the extinction of passion, which is essentially knowledge of destruction, full arahantship. He says, what is it that conditions extinction of passion? It is deliverance or freedom. What is it that conditions deliverance and freedom? It is dispassion. What conditions dispassion? Is disillusionment or disenchantment. What conditions disillusion and disenchantment? It is knowledge and vision of things as they are. What conditions knowledge and vision of things as they are? Concentration or samadhi. What conditions samadhi? Happiness. What conditions happiness? Tranquility. What conditions tranquility? Rapture. What conditions rapture? Joy. What conditions joy? Faith and confidence. So this is what the Buddha says. This is your part by part the development of the path. And he says that these are prerequisites. From faith and confidence arises joy, pamoja. With that sense of delight and joy that's initially due to the sense of faith and confidence, either in the practice or coming to a teaching that speaks to your experience and that is helpful for a way out. That joy, if you keep developing and practicing, gives rise to piti, rapture, P-I-T-I, not P-I-T-Y, the Pali term piti, rapture, joyful interest, enthusiasm. This is a joy that's a drive, right? The traditional analogy given is like, if you're so thirsty in the desert, right? And then someone tells you that there's water in a certain direction. By just knowing that, you're like, oh, wow, yes, let's go towards that. There's an energetic sense of a joyfulness, which is, again, different from pamoja, right? You can see there's a different layer, almost different purity of joy. And with piti, rapture, that gives rise to tranquility. It calms down. And with tranquility, it arises happiness, right? Sukha. Sukha is usually more settled, calmer than the experience of piti, which is that drive. Again, the analogy is, if someone tells you there's water, piti arises. Oh, great, I've been searching for so long. Quickly, let's go there. And then you're there, you dip yourself in there, you wash yourself, you have a good drink. And once you've had a good drink, that's like sukha. It's like a sense of delight and happiness because the mind is at ease that way. That's sukha. And it is sukha, happiness, that gives rise to samadhi, unification of the mind or concentration. So this is really important here because if you're trying to push our way in the practice, and if we miss joy along the way in its various different forms, most probably your mind is not going to be able to establish strong samadhi or concentration. The mind is too tight, it's too tense. It's not able to come in a unified way. And without samadhi, then knowledge and vision doesn't arise because the Buddha says it is through samadhi or concentration, unification, that gives rise to yatha bhuta nanandasana, which is knowledge and vision of things as they are, namely impermanence and non-self, and how as we mishandle these phenomena, we get ourselves into dukkha, i.e. the three characteristics of existence. It is samadhi that arises, that gives rise to yatha buddha nanandasana, which is the knowledge and vision. And it's through knowledge and vision that gives rise to disenchantment, nibbida. It is through nibbida that gives rise to viraga, dispassion, which is not for me. There's something that's much deeper freedom that's actually there. And it's viraga that gives rise to vimutti, which is freedom, deliverance, emancipation. And it is through that finally gives rise to tanhakaya, which is extinction of passion, through knowledge of actual destruction of all the taints, which is you graduate arahantship. So the Buddha was very clear. He says these are the prerequisites. And he goes on to give an analogy. He says that it is like when there's rain, it rains heavily on the mountain, right? It rains heavily on the mountaintop and the water flows downhill to fill the hollows. As it fills the hollows, it fills the crevices, the cracks. As they become full, they fill up the pools, the lakes, the streams, the river, and ultimately the ocean. This analogy is important because it doesn't say that it flows from one point to another. It fills one, it becomes full, and it fills the next part, it fills the next part. That means as it works to the ocean, each part is full. This is important because sometimes people get stuck in the later parts of the nibbida, viraga, vimutti part, or they think that they are there, might not be. But where's the joy? Where's the tranquility? Where's the happiness? Where's the samadhi? So that's why this is an important teaching that even from the Buddha's perspective, and you can look this up, it's called Upanisa Sutta. And the Bhikkhu Bodhi has written a great commentary about this particular scripture. You can look it up in Access to Insight. Samyutta Nikaya 12:23. Here, the Buddha is clearly telling us that to be successful on the path, joyful states must be there. Your mind must be joyful. Why? Because a joyous mind is uplifted, is buoyant. Right? A mind that is overwhelmed by tanha and craving is typically tight and sunken or restless. But a joyous mind typically is more open, is light, right? And of course, it is different layers, there are different qualities of that. For example, piti is very buoyant. Sukha, happiness, it's more settled. Pamoja is like that, the initial, wow. Like, you know, in Chinese Buddhism, they call the happiness that arises from the Dhamma, Vasi. So as you can see, the path itself entails so many elements of joyfulness. And so how are we going to expect to reach awakening or even have a glimpse of Nibbana without having the capacity to open our hearts and our minds, to have an experience of joy? And how can we have joy for others without first even having the capacity to be joyous inside of our hearts? If you really look at the teachings on the Brahma Viharas, the four sublime states, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, which is mudita, and equanimity, these are almost like stages of practice that loving kindness provides a foundation for compassion, which is the open mind. And with that, then it opens up to be able to feel joy for others. And eventually it settles down into a deep sense of stability, of equanimity. But again, they're all full, right? They're like pools that are being filled, that's actually full. So you can see that joy is such a key part. Hopefully, we're starting to see anyway, there's such a key part of our practice. So how do we find and increase more joy in our lives? That's probably then the next question that we need to ask ourselves. It's a key one, because some of us have forgotten the joy of coming to the Dhamma, having been in the Dhamma for so long. There's a teacher of mine who says that sometimes people say, if you practice the Dhamma for in the first year that I practice the Dhamma, the Buddha is in your heart. The 10th year that we practice the Dhamma, the Buddha is like far, far away. And some of us are like that. We think we're in there, we're going around for a long time, but sometimes we miss the key part of the teaching. Whereas someone who is new to it, who has access to that joy, who actually has the lightness, that is a very good, strong pasture for Dhamma practice to continue to grow. Doesn't mean that we are doomed because we're in here for so long, for practicing for 10, 20, 50 years, it's okay. But it's about rebalancing. Yeah. It's about in our day-to-day life and in our Dhamma practice, in our meditation practice, accessing, getting in touch with, connecting with these helpful states of joy. And in the Buddha Dhamma, the Buddha speaks of like worldly pleasures, and that's like a really lowly level, like things that we get pleasure out of here and there. That people who don't practice, who practice, we all experience some level of worldly joy. And it says, then there's also the joy that comes from a trained mind, right? Like this joy that he was speaking about in the prerequisites, things like piti, things like sukha that arises in the practice, right? Or in jhanic states, the joy that arises from there. In fact, the formula for jhana in there is always there's joy in there, the earlier parts, there's piti, there's also sukha. And eventually piti drops away, there's sukha, right? And then that drops away, and then there's equanimity as well. But as you can see, it's all in there. Those type of joy, the Buddha praises. I've been practicing insight meditation for a number of years now and teaching it too. And I find that sometimes in the tradition, we shy away from joyful states for good reasons that teachers will caution us. Don't get stuck in there for too long. Don't get drawn into it too much. But the flip side of it, what can happen is that we sometimes become fearful of joy that arises in our meditation practice. This, I think, is then off balance. Because if you look at what the Buddha is saying, it says that this is a part of the process of the journey. You recognize it. It's okay, right? Connect with that, because this is a prerequisite for the next step that will arise. So in our meditation practice, and when we experience joy, it's a good sign. Don't be afraid of it. Yeah. Of course, depending on the different traditions, they deal and manage that slightly differently. But overall, it should be seen as a positive step of progress. So going back to how do we find and increase joy in our lives? I think it comes down to a few key things that I found that have been very helpful for me, which might be helpful for you, which might not be. And I'll share these three things with you. And these three things are helpful in the meditation itself and also in the day-to-day life. First one is about our focus, where we place our attention on. In our day-to-day life, we move through our life, experiencing different things. And each moment our experience is in fact a creation of the mind, right? The Buddha was in fact quite clear about this, that it is a combination of formations, of sankharas arising, and what we're bringing to each moment. So each moment, the reality that we create is called the 18 realms. 6 senses coming into contact with 6 items. So the eye with form, ears with sound, right? The 6 senses with the 6 corresponding objects and 6 points of contact. That is how we determine reality, right? In there as well, it depends on what we focus on in our day-to-day life. That determines our reality. But let's make it a little bit simpler, right? I said that because there is the depth in the Dharma that speaks a lot about that, but it can also be overwhelming to understand. It might take some time, but let's make it a little bit simpler. Our perception of a reality of a situation is determined by the mind that we bring to it. Same situation, a person will have said something that's quite unpleasant to you. Same person, same situation, same location, saying the same thing. But if you're in a mind that's agitated, the reality that you see is one form. But if your mind is light and buoyant and joyful, you'll see the same situation completely differently. Same person, same location, saying the exact same thing. If you're tired, you might be more worked up. Or you might not be. You might be, oh, whatever. If the mind is energetic, or the mind is sluggish, if the mind is calm, if the mind is joyous, it's going to see the exact same situation completely differently. So in that way, there is no real sense of a reality of that moment. It is about interaction between the 6 senses and the 6 inputs that we have. So it's a coming together, right, of contact, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. There's only those 6 and the 6 and the 6. So that's why it's called the 18 realms. So how we actually approach the situation is very much dependent on how we are actually approaching it to begin with, what mind we are bringing to it, which also means that there's a choice here. With a trained mind, we can direct and divert our attention to focusing on different aspects of a particular situation. And you'll see a different side, a different reality, which will make you feel differently and therefore also respond differently. If I'm really tired, I had a really rough day, I haven't had enough sleep, someone says something horrible to me, I'll probably want to punch them in the face. Same person, same situation, saying the same thing, but this time my mind is at ease, is in fact quite joyous, and they'll say whatever they say, I'll smile and I just walk away. Right? Or I might smile and say something that's helpful that completely changes the entire situation. As you can see, it changes depending on how we focus on. And as your Dharma practice and your meditation practice progresses, you're able to also move more comfortably in terms of what is going to be helpful states. And to a certain point, you didn't even need to do that. It's just automatically there. For example, if you're used to paying attention to qualities like the 4 Brahma Viharas, let's say you're doing metta practice. You're used to bringing your mind and focusing the mind on qualities of loving kindness or metta. And with that, in metta, there is joy. Joy and metta goes together because there's a sense of wishing others to be well. There's a sense of joyfulness and lift in that. If you're used to doing that in your meditation practice, naturally, the mind is by default functioning in that mode in day-to-day life. The mind is naturally wishing others well, more buoyant, more flexible, lighter, and more open. It becomes a more default state of your being deep down. Similarly, if you progress in the practice and you take joy as your object of meditation, in which you can in some practices, you can even experience joy. You just call to mind joy and you just pop up. In fact, I was recently reading, as I was researching some notes for this evening's talk, I saw an article, and one of the teachers says, you can't make your mind feel joy. That's incorrect. You can. A well-practiced mind can call up joy just like that. You can enter into states of that. And if you're able to live in a day-to-day life with a sense of joy, and of course, this needs practice. You can't just force your way to it. But if naturally you keep inclining your mind towards that, and you're able to just interact with the world from a joyful mind, you see the world completely differently again. Recently, I was giving a talk, and one of the questions that was asked is, during the difficult times like this in the world, right? The whole world is suffering because of the pandemic, the situation. How can we take care of our mind? And I gave various different responses, but one of the things I also say is that it's also about what we sometimes choose to pay attention to. We can pay attention to the pain, the difficulties, the suffering, and that's fine. That's a reality of it. We're not shying away from it. But also pay attention to the gratitude for the people who are actually the frontline workers, the people who are actually doing the work, who are helping, who are trying to problem solve, who are risking their own lives just to be there for the others. Same situation, but there are different facets to it. There is no A objective situation. It is all subjective to a very deep degree. Now, this is not about forcing us to be overly positive, no. It's about being able to hold these views lightly and being able to incline the mind in a way that's going to be helpful for us to be able to find a way forward. So focus is one of the key things that I find as useful and important in helping us to find and develop joy. If you're talking about meditation, you can take things like metta, joy, gratitude as your meditation object. That can be helpful. You're fundamentally changing the default state of your mind, what lens you typically look through. Regardless of whether it is very hard for us not to have a particular lens to look at things. It's not impossible. it's hard, but a refined mind can get to that more closely. But most of the time we are going around the world with colored glasses. If you're going around the world in colored glasses, we might as well go around with more helpful colored glasses. Like with loving kindness, with care, with compassion, with joy. Because it'll make life much easier, more freeing for us and also for those around us. In the meditation, in our life as well. So the first one is focus. The second one is another, in fact, quite simple one, but also a very powerful one, which is not forgetting to smile. Really, literally smile. We have known from scientific studies that just simply smiling changes the physiological response, changes how we perceive things. In fact, there are studies done by psychologists that get people to come into the lab and they say, like, it's not as big as it's a pen usually. They say, hold the pen with your mouth, with your teeth, like this. Yeah. So it's a little bit hard with the mask, but you can imagine. Yeah. So this is the first group. The second group, they say, hold the pen in your mouth like this. So this is like simulating a smile. And they don't tell them, they don't say, please smile, please don't smile. One is this, which is like a partial smile, this big smile. And the third one is hold a pen like this, but with your lips. So you're not really smiling. 3 different situations, conditions. Various studies have used this particular paradigm. And the findings are in fact quite fascinating. I'm a scientist by profession. So this fascinates me. For those people in the condition whereby they're asked to do this, which is the big smile, yeah, they find that if you give them material to look at that is funny, they find that it's funnier without being told that smile. In fact, what the study is masked. It says, we're just interested in looking at how people multitask, like being able to hold something in their mouth while doing something else. You know, very cheeky, these psychologists, I tell you. Don't trust psychologists. But they found that that's the effect. That funny cartoons seem funnier. Yeah. Or pictures of beautiful sceneries appear more beautiful. You have more positive affect if you're in this condition as opposed to this condition, which is fascinating. They don't even know they're smiling. So simply from a physiological perspective, it changes how we view things. And there's one particular study that's done in China, actually. It's still a good study. Uses the same paradigm, but instead of pen, they use chopsticks. Same thing, 3 situations, this with teeth, which is like a partial smile. This is like a big smile. In science, they call it the Duchenne Smile, which means you activate the muscles on the mouth and you also activate the muscles of the eye, which is like the big smile, like this. And then the third one is just simply holding it with your lips, no smile. And this study was done by students who were mildly depressed. And again, they masked the reason for the study. Again, these cheeky psychologists said, we just wanted to see how you multitask or something like that. And then they gave them a task that's actually quite hard to do. Right? They have to compare very similar patterns, either arrows going this way, or arrows going that way, or arrows going this way, or arrows going separately. They say, if the arrows are going the same, say the same. If it's going in opposite direction, says different, and you have to do it as quickly as you can. Yeah. They found that those with the chopsticks this way, which is the big Duchenne smile, made less errors. Simply that. Nothing, no other difference, made less error. They were not even aware that they're actually smiling. Secondly, And this is also a very interesting part. When you made a mistake, they've got all this EEG equipment that's linking up, looking at your activation. And there's an activation called, let me look it up so that I don't give you wrong information. It's called ERN, error-related negativity, which means when we do something wrong, that effect, there's a pattern on the EEG, but there's actually quite like a signature there. So whenever you do something wrong, you get that feeling. You know what I'm talking about. And this is picked up on an EEG. So because they have to do it fast, whenever they make a mistake, there's a feedback, right? I don't know what the feedback is. I can't remember now. It might be something like wrong, right? For example, that. And then they see how they actually respond to that. And they found that for those with a big smile and even a standard smile, compared to the no smile condition, there's decreased ERN. That means when they make a mistake, they're not giving themselves as hard a time. That's what it's suggesting. And those with the least amount of ERN, least response, are those with the Duchenne smile, the biggest smile. So even at a very subtle level, things are affecting us when we smile, to the point that when we don't even know that we are smiling, there's still an effect, which is fascinating. When I was doing more serious metta practice about 2.5 years ago now, Venerable Vimalaramsi told us to smile. He says, yes, just smile. So, but what if you don't feel it? Just smile, right? And years back, even, Venerable Mahinda, also another big meditation teacher of metta, he used to say, fake it till you make it. And now there's science that backs it up. Even if you don't feel like smiling, just smile, something is happening deep down. That's what the science is suggesting. So smiling is really a key part of how we start to access and connect with a joyful state. Sometimes the horse is before the cart, sometimes the cart is before the horse, but in this case, when you start smiling, something shifts. An open heart smiles, but smiles also open your heart. So even if you don't feel like smiling, smile more. In fact, if you don't feel like smiling, please smile even more. That's what the evidence is suggesting. Smile can become a useful way of practicing. Whether you're doing breath meditation, you're doing metta meditation, whatever meditation you're doing, it's useful to hold a gentle little smile in the practice. I did not realize the importance of this until I was asked to do this in the recent years. And it is important because when you smile, and we have to continue to pay attention to your smile, it helps your mind stay sharp and clear, that you're still on the game. Whether you're noticing the movements associated with breathing, whether you're having focus on your metta or whatever object, if you smile along your practice, it becomes a good indicator whether you're still on topic. Because when the mind drifts off, the smile drops. Try it. When your mind drifts off somewhere, the smile goes. And it can be a very good indicator to say, hey, come back. And then you come back, you smile again. All right, I'm still on the topic. And then your mind drifts off. Oh, the smile goes. No, hang on, smile again. It becomes a very good flag, firstly. Secondly, what happens is that the mind and body learns that in a meditative state, the states that you experience, that you're familiar with, that naturally gets conditioned with a smile. Yeah. And this is really helpful and important because we meditate to live a better life. And some people say I can achieve certain states in meditation, but not in day-to-day life. Well, we have to make that bridge, that connection. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah. This smile, if you have certain states that you are in a meditative state and you smile, there's a connection that forms there. So that when in day-to-day life, the smile becomes the trigger for you to access and connect with that state of mind. For example, if you're naturally feeling joyful or peaceful, and you have a smile, yeah, and in a day-to-day life, when you smile, the joyful and peaceful state comes up along with it. It can trigger that because it's like a shortcut into that state. This helps you transition or connect rather, not transition, connect the experience of the on cushion into day-to-day life. So for those various reasons, I typically now ask people in their practice to have a little bit of a smile. If you can have a huge smile, go for it. But at least have a slight different smile, a slightly gentle smile. So smile more. There's nothing to lose from it. Even if you don't know you're smiling, there's stuff happening deep down. The way you perceive the world is going to be different. Because the way you perceive the world that's different, you're going to interact differently with the world. And because of that, that's going to change the course of where we bring our karma. So smile more. That's the second one. And the third thing I find really helpful and important to access joy is to be able to soften and relax. Again, I learned this from Venerable Vimalaramsi and various teachers. About 4 or 5 years ago, I felt that my meditation came to a point whereby it was a little bit stuck. So I went to sit with one of my teachers, Lynn Bausfield, and did a retreat with her. I was progressing well in the first few days, 4 or 5 days. Things were happening. And then I hit a point whereby I got stuck. Felt that just stuff was just not happening. Things were just not right. And then I went to see Lynn for my daily interview. And she says, stop meditating, go out for a walk, enjoy the scenery, smile to people, speak to people. Yeah. And he was like, really? This is a very usual instruction in the meditation retreat. Usually we say, don't make eye contact, look down, yeah, fully have your attention inwards. But Lynn says, no, go out, go walk. Go look around the scenery. It was a beautiful place that I was at a retreat. In fact, it was in Bali. So it was a small little village that was there, paddy fields. He said, go and walk on the paddy fields. Go and look around. And I did that. And that just helped balance things because it allowed my mind to relax. I was pushing way too hard. Relaxing in practice is really important. Same retreat, certain point. Can't remember which one happened before or after. But again, certain days it was just hard grind for some reason. And it's really funny because you will relate to this story because you will have heard this before. I was like so disheartened, things were not happening, and I was like, let's go to sleep. I lie down, just different states started to just emerge, right? It's like, wow, this stuff about Ananda is real, right? Not that I've ever doubted it, but you experience it when you let go and relax. It's like, all right, I've done enough for today. I'll deal with it tomorrow. I'll wake up a little bit early if I need to do practice. In the meditation retreat, lie down, poof, things were starting to happen. Different states started to present itself. So being able to soften and relax in meditation is important, and also in day-to-day life. I was saying Venerable Vimalaramsi spoke about this a lot, which makes a lot of sense. It says that the nature of craving and clinging is that the mind is tight. So when there's tightness, there is tanha, there is craving that's actually there in one form or another. Okay, that's interesting. especially the craving, the tightness in the mind. Physical tightness sometimes can be sickness, can be due to conditions, weather, food, whatever it is. But the mind, if the mind is tight, craving is there, tanha is there. So whenever you notice tension and tightness, soften, relax, soften, relax. So for the entire retreat that I have with him, say smile and relax. Smile, relax, focus on metta. Right? So I did that. And I could see the effects of how it actually shifted and changed my practice. Simply just tweaking that, because I was able to back away a little bit more, soften, smile a little bit more, and then things progress a fair bit. Because it is the tightness that takes us for a ride. And if you're able to learn to detect and recognize that tightness of the mind and being able to soften and let go, especially in very refined states of meditation, you'll notice very subtle tension that actually comes up. A certain, even though it's sometimes really calm and quiet, there'll be just kind of blips of things that come up. As the blips come up, you notice that the mind tenses up a little bit. And if you can learn to actually soften and let go of those small little bits, the states deepen a little bit more. Deeper realities present itself to you. Of course, that's meditation. In day-to-day life, it's the same thing. Whether or not you're a meditator, have a sense of awareness of your body and your mind, just generally, right? Even lightly being aware. And if you notice tension, soften. And I get this a lot at work. I'll be reviewing an article or something like that. I'll be reading certain things and I notice, hang on, too tight here, soften. Physically, soften. Mentally, relax and soften too. In fact, that is even the more important one, because physically, sometimes, like I say, it's conditions, sickness, one thing or another that we can't. But relax and soften, relax and soften. I used to think when I was early on in my meditation practice and the meditation journey, especially in a tradition that emphasizes that strong heroic effort, this relaxed instruction seems a little bit too simple. Like, oh, it's just for those who kind of want to just relax a little bit. They're not really doing meditation or insight practices. They're just kind of coming to have a relaxing time. There's a sense, a wrong view that that's not part of this practice, but it is. Effort is about a balance. Yeah. And the subtler that you go, the balance is subtler. It's a very soft, subtle balancing, right? Even from a very, very coarse balancing act between pushing and holding back, it requires a balance. In life, we go push for certain things versus holding back, softening into, like allowing what arises to arise. All the way down to very subtle states of meditation, it's always constantly a balance. And that's part of the effort, right effort. Right effort is not too tight, not too soft. It is about letting go of the unhelpful states and engaging in helpful states. That is the definition of right effort. The good that has arisen, let it go on for more. The good that has yet to arise, allow it to arise. The negative, the unwholesome that's arisen, stop it. The unwholesome that's not yet arisen, do not give it cause for it to come out. So part of the effort is recognizing if you push too hard, this is not helpful. It's too much pushing. So you have to kind of lean back a little bit. Of course, too lax is not going to be helpful. So part of it is recognizing what is wholesome and what is helpful in that moment, in each moment of your practice. Same thing in our day-to-day life. Whether we're dealing with a situation, we're dealing with a person, right? We're living life. It's about finding that right relaxed practice to move around in life. So those are three things that I found have been really helpful for me to find and increase joy in my meditation practice and in my day-to-day life. It is that we keep training the mind through repeated practice of being able to focus on that which is helpful, which is essential. In the Dhamma part, it talks about recognize what is essential and what is not essential. By focusing on that which is helpful and essential, being able to hold a smile, whether in practice or in day-to-day life, and to be able to relax and soften. If we can do that more and more, we are giving rise and more ingredients for the arising of joyful states. Because after all, a joyful state is not only the fruit of awakening, but it's a prerequisite of awakening. So connect with joy more in your life. This is part of your Dharma practice. This is a fundamental building block of your Dharma practice. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
How are we going with time? And whether you've got questions, we might be able to take 1 or 2 questions. Then I want to close with the sharing of merits that we do together. Any questions? Yes.
To begin with, I feel sorry for everybody who missed this Dhamma talk tonight, because I learned a great deal. Tell you why. About 2 years ago, Graham White gave a talk about watching dukkha. Watching dukkha, we usually find a cause for dukkha, meaning my wife is upset with me, or the car broke down, etc. So for 1 month, he suggested, do not blame the trigger, because dukkha comes up from various triggers. So just acknowledge the pain, the dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness, but do not blame the trigger. 1 month, 2 months, it's incredible that you learn that the underlying law of nature really is dukkha. But then, for many, many years, I realized now that we have marvelous Dhamma teachers in Sydney, including you, Doctor. But in 50 years of listening to various teachers, Prakantipalo, Ayakema, they were fantastic. Nobody talked about devotion, faith, as if it was dirty words or it would be something wrong in the Dhamma. But personally, myself, I'm greatly devoted. I'm very grateful for the teaching and different kind of person. In a meditation course here at Wat Buddha Dhamma, on the 7th day, it was a 10-day course. I never got anywhere with the meditation. And then I said, one evening, I had enough. It was too much. I suffered so much. I collected my daughters, my family, my friends, holding hands. Ayakema was holding my hand, paying respect to the Buddha. All the gratitude filled up my heart. And from that moment on, the first absorption, rapture, the whole body. It's such a sweet feeling. People won't understand if they have never experienced. So joy came from devotion, from the gratitude. But my question is, why is gratitude so rare in people? The Buddha said that's one of the rarest qualities in humanity, gratitude. What's the reason for it?
Because the self is strong. For you to have for anyone to have gratitude, they need to see beyond the self. And I find that when the self is so sticky, gratitude comes, it's very difficult to trail behind. Right? That's one of the key things I would say. Of course, many other reasons. But one of the key things that get in the way of gratitude is this strong sense of me.
Me, I.
Which we are all guilty of.
In some degrees.
That's right.
Some degrees.
That's right.
And also, I think one of the reasons for very little gratitude in our hearts, no humility in us. We are very strong egos. And without humility, I don't think we can get anywhere in the Dhamma.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we learn to bow. That's a practice in itself. Yeah, if you know how to actually take that, you're actually letting go of that sense of self in the bowing. It's a very traditional practice, not just Buddhist practice, but it's a very traditional practice in many different communities. It's about humility. And again, the opposite of humility is a strong sense of self, me, like you said. And that's the same obstacle for gratitude as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Okay, I'm aware of the time. So what I suggest is that we close properly. I do apologize if those who are on Zoom have some questions, but feel free to get in touch. So I'm going to just take you through a very short practice of sharing merits. It's a reflection rather. I'll bring your mind to a sense of settledness, a short practice. Just allowing tension to drop away from the body and the mind. Allowing a sense of ease to arise in the body and also in the mind. And calling to mind our gratitude towards the triple gem, the precious Buddha, the precious Dhamma, and the precious Sangha. And allowing our heart to connect with this deep sense of gratitude for what it has given us in its many forms in our life. And in a joyful, grateful heart and mind, we share whatever goodness that arises from our lives. We share all the merits that we've accumulated this evening and throughout our lives, and dedicate this in whichever way it is appropriate to you. Call to mind who you'd like to dedicate this to. As a community, it is important for us to remember and recognize the contributions of Lily Koo and all those who have contributed to creating this space, this community that allows us to come together. Dedicating all the goodness and merits to all those who have been helpful, who have shown benevolence towards us, whoever comes to mind. Dedicating this goodness, these merits, to all those known or unknown to us, who have one way or another been in touch with our lives. And also sharing the goodness from our lives, the merits that we have, to all beings in the 10 directions. May all beings be free, be liberated. May all beings find joy and happiness. Sadhu, 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 sadhu.